The following is meant for entertainment and educational purposes. It is not meant to establish a doctor-patient relationship. Please consult your mental health provider for your mental health needs. Hello, welcome to Chez Eric, a place where we talk about psychiatry and religion with a focus on how to apply it to your life. And I am Dr. Eric. I am a psychiatrist who happens to be religious, and I like making a big thing about it on social media for you to hopefully, find what you're looking for, whether it's an understanding of God or understanding of other people or understanding of yourself. I hope that this content helps. William James's The Varieties of Religious Experience is a fairly fundamental book that was written about religious experiences, and we're going through it, and we are now at Saintliness, and we're talking about the fruits of saintliness. In this particular video, we'll be talking about two major things. One is purity of life, and the second is this idea of pain, because William James wants to talk about pain. So when it comes to purity of life, James observes that someone who is saintly has a tendency to be more sensitive to inner conflict, and their confusion begins to grow as it relates to understanding their place in the world or how they want to interact with the world. For someone who's very saintly, only the spiritual things matter, and the not spiritual things are like useless. They don't want to deal with it. It is what James says, repugnant. And this is mixed with an emphasis on morality, that they want to be good and they want to do good things for other people. And there's also a tendency to have a passion to sacrifice for God. What William James finds interesting is that the fruit of purity of life, purity in one's life, when someone is becoming a saint or is a saint or has a saintly attitude towards things, is that it resembles asceticism quite a bit. And what is asceticism? We talked about this before, and James talks about it a lot in previous lectures, previous parts of this series. And asceticism is where people really want to remove indulgences in their life. They don't want to enjoy anything. They want to live a simple life, keep things super simple. Simple clothing, simple food, simple needs, and they don't want anything else at all. And when purity of life is taken to the extreme, it really does look like asceticism. He lists out reasons why. Asceticism, it could be an issue where someone's actually disgusted with life. So like I said, with the purity of life, then purity of only wanting to do spiritual things. So if you hate non-spiritual things, then you're just going to cast it out away. That looks like asceticism. And if purity of what you eat, that looks like asceticism, where you only want to eat, pure things or simple things. You want to wear simple clothing, purity, right? There's a purity concept. And then also there could be fruits of love, right? Where they want to sacrifice for God. So ascetics would want to sacrifice to understand love better. They want to understand God better. And same with purity, right? If you're very, very pure, you want to sacrifice. He then kind of points out that in asceticism, there's a group that has a tendency to want to hurt themselves. The term is flagellates, where they whip themselves to understand God more because they want to escape the good feelings and they only want to have bad feelings, right? And in that sense, that's where purity can also come into play as well, where they have pessimistic feelings about themselves, and therefore by creating this pain, you are buying yourself, some sort of sense of salvation, where that's how you become pure with the pain, because you experience a good thing. So you experience a good thing that's bad because you're supposed to be pure, so you do a bad thing to yourself in order to feel pure again, because you're supposed to have no good emotions or whatsoever. I don't necessarily condone that. Please don't do that. I'm just describing what William James has observed among people who do that. And so with the fruit of purity of life, he relates it to asceticism. And also he talks about how asceticism can have a tendency to have a psychopathic version of it, where they're irrationally obsessed with or fixed on an idea. And finally, he also points out ascetic exercises can be prompted by maybe perversions of the body, where pain feels good, and that's why they do it. So again, James is very, very interested in the idea of asceticism, and he says that the fruit of purity of life from saintliness can potentially be a root cause of asceticism. And so James kind of then goes into a little bit of a tangent about pain. And he talks about, when he discusses about the idea of pain, he says, a strange moral transformation has swept over the Western world in the past century. We no longer think that we are called to face physical pain with calmness. It is no longer expected that a man should endure or inflict it. And that's pretty interesting. He makes this observation that we tend to see now religion as a path towards comfort and a path towards happiness and a path towards not having pain. When we find in the scriptures, generally, there's a lot of pain, a lot of bad things happening to people who follow God. And in the past, prior to James, when someone would flagellate themselves and hurt themselves, it tended to arouse more wonder and fear than people wanting to follow, right? However, times have changed and we don't really see that as a form of a religious pursuit. If someone were to start hurting themselves, cutting themselves, we wouldn't say, oh, go keep doing that, you're following God. We would say, oh, you need to see a psychiatrist potentially, or a mental health provider, or please stop doing that, you're hurting yourself. And I'm not sure, I don't think that that group is as prominent as it is nowadays as it was back then. And, seeking things that are easy and pleasant is instinctive, right? And pursuing pain might seem not instinctive. And in moderate degrees, seeking pain might actually be seen as hardworking. But it is in the extreme of seeking the pain that there's this sort of paradox. And the psychological reason that William James points out is this. When we see this idea of theology, it can be very, very complex. And we have, psychology of theology is very, very complex. We're trying to sort it out. And he says we have stimulations and abstractions and inhibitions and habits and criticisms and all this stuff. And it either leaves a good or a bad taste in your mind when you're trying to go through and understand these theological concepts. And when we find that among them, we have, distasteful or unsatisfying experiences, right? We can try and keep a happy face, but that's really annoying. And a passive happiness, right, is generally unappealing, and that we need to mix in a sense of austerity and negativity. So in other words, it's that if you have just a happy-go-lucky, happy sort of relationship with religion or divine or things like that, there's something off about that. And we want to have some sense of austerity and negativity to mix it in. Because people are going to differ, even though people are going to differ on what mix of happy and austere it is, what we find is that both of them kind of have to be together. And each individual has their own sense of what is the best mix between happy stuff and negative stuff. And some people are happier and can weather, that situation. But other people need to feel a sacrifice of some sort, a sort of pain, in order to feel connected to a divine being of some sort. And sometimes when people become religious, that sense of pain is, pointing towards self, and that's what the ascetics would do. I read this part of William James what he's talking about again and again and again, and it's hard to kind of fit in, especially when I feel like it's a little bit of a tangent. But I think what he's getting at is this idea that sacrifice and suffering is related to our psychological need to balance out the general generic passive happiness that doesn't really feel all that helpful. And this kind of goes into an idea of toxic positivity, where you're positive, and toxic, and it becomes toxic because you end up having an incorrect view of reality. And that when we're talking about a religious experience, we're really talking about, of course, there's happiness that's there, but that there is some form of austerity and pain and sacrifice that needs to be done. Because if I'm not sacrificing for something greater than myself, then what is it that I'm doing? It feels almost meaningless. Although I'm not exactly sure that's what James is talking about. He was very depressed in his time. And it's possible that what he's saying here is a reflection more of his depression than it is a reflection of his observations of other people. So take what I say in this section with a grain of salt. But I do believe that there is this concept of, when we're talking about purity, we're talking about eliminating good things, things that make us even happy, indulgences and asceticism. And then in doing that, it is a form of sacrifice. And that form of sacrifice is related to this idea of pain and experiencing pain. And in all of this sort of thing, what we find is that religion perhaps is not really a pursuit of happiness, but a pursuit only of God. And then God doesn't guarantee us happiness, but guarantees us something else. And so the question is, what is that something else? Well, those presumably are the fruits of saintliness that we're going through. And these fruits are potentially more meaningful if that matters to you. And these fruits constitutes the religious experience that we are trying to achieve when we're trying to achieve an understanding of God. Of course, I could be just talking out of butt. Who knows? All right, but I hope it was at least thought-provoking. Do like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time for the final part of this lecture series on saintliness. All right, bye. Hey, sign up for my weekly newsletter. I send out emails every week on psychiatry and religion. I realize that email is a great way to go deep into these topics. So if you want more content, check out chesericpurl.com and subscribe over there. Thanks.